Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I am one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 4, Episode 24, The Quickening. Before we continue, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. So again, Twitter is now called X, so X! The
You
Fire
can find
Caves,
us
a
on
Star
X
Trek
Twitter.
Deep Space Nine podcast.
And that's right. We are finally back across all of the various platforms. Twitter will need to be severely updated because there's just, a fundamental lack of what we had before. I'm trying to get everything back up to speed, of course. But yes, you will find us once again on X, not Twitter, on X. I don't think I will ever get used to saying that. It, in my life as Twitter for far too long for me to now call it X. So it will
Yeah,
just that's just how we're gonna have to deal with it.
right.
Another way to mark how old I am is that I will forever refer to it as Twitter, and for everyone else who refers to it and is used to it as X, there you go.
I don't think anyone will. I think that was a huge mistake, as I've said before.
Yeah.
So, but anyway,
Absolutely, I agree. Um, well, as we go and get started here, closing out the fourth season of Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, we will be talking about the episode "The Quickening," as David has already said. An interesting episode, to say the least. Again, something I feel like I say a lot. This is also an episode that I tend to skip in my rewatch, and we will get into that, I'm sure,
mhm.
as we cover everything else in this episode. But before we do, David, how was your week?
That's fine. Nothing much to report. I did finish that book on 9/11 I talked about, the Fallen Rise book. Very good book. Very really, it really gets you in there with some of the details about some of the stories of what happened that day. Some things I hadn't known. I didn't know how many people jumped, for example, from the buildings as they were burning because they couldn't get down. It's very sad to think.
It actually tells you that the number of
Actually,
people,
quite a number of people actually died that way.
and it
Yeah,
told you the
the number of
number of
people.
people.
It was over 100. Several, nearly 200 people they think jumped from the buildings to their deaths. So very sad. In fact,
Mhm.
one of the firefighters who died that day was actually killed by someone who jumped because they fell on him.
Oh
Um,
wow!
yeah, so it's stuff like that. Just really makes you again. I mean, like you, you don't relive trauma because you enjoy it, but you relive it to remember why it impacted you and to understand how it affected other people. And it was a big moment for all of us who were, alive and aware of what was going on that day. And I was in middle school when that was going on. So anyway, not to rehash it, but to say I enjoyed the book. Glad I read it. I also read Agatha Christie's Halloween Party, which is apparently the basis for the new Hercule Poirot Kenneth Branagh movie, Haunting in Venice. I have not seen the new movie yet, though apparently it has, I guess, maybe just character names as the only things that really carry over from the book to the movie, because from the trailer, I can already tell the book is very, very different than what the movie is going to be. I look forward to seeing it. I loved reading Hercule Poirot mystery novels when I was a kid, so I enjoy rereading some more as an adult. Um, I haven't loved Kenneth Branagh's take on the character and on his. I don't think the movies have been quite as good as I would hope for.
Hmm.
But I'll still go see this one just because I want to support the idea of the character and the books and all that. Again, having loved the character as a kid. So
I
that was
remember
me.
watching them. I remember watching those the Agatha Christie televised. They took her stories and obviously developed them into various show
Maybe
incarnations,
yes,
like on
yeah,
the BBC. Masterpiece Theater was the one I was thinking of, as a matter of fact, that did a lot of them,
wow,
and that was how my mother and I used to spend a lot of time when I was growing up, was watching these, classic stories brought to life and whatever else. It was great. I loved them. Now I have not read. Officially read an Agatha Christie novel or anything like that, and maybe I should,
mhm,
especially considering what you just said about how it is so vastly different. What you see on screen versus what we get. But Yeah, I mean, I'd be very interested to check out a couple of them just to see, because I mean, obviously they're quite famous, timeless, so definitely worth a look. I don't think that
Yeah.
I'll get it done before the movie. Is the movie already out? Do you know, or is it coming out soon?
A Haunting in Venice came out this weekend. So
Okay,
yes, it is out.
okay,
Recording this, that is. So yes, and the one that came out, the first movie that came out that Kenneth Branagh did was Murder on the Orient Express, which is also one of her classic. It's one of her classic books. Like if there are any
yeah,
Hercule Poirot
that's the one.
stories,
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna
yeah,
say that's probably a
exactly.
good one. To
If
very
you know,
recognizable title.
yes, and it's got a great plot about what happened, like how the murder, a murder takes place on the Orient Express. What that is and why is a very unique and great murder story. Um, then and then there were none is another one of her most popular ones. That one doesn't have Hercule Poirot as the detective. It's set on a basically a deserted island with 10 strangers, and they slowly get picked off one by one until there were none left. And it's kind of a scary one because you're like, wait a minute, what's happening? All these people are just dying. But apparently, well, I won't say anything else. That's a good one. If you ever get to, if you have to pick one, if you have to start anywhere, those are the two to start with. Those are great ones to pick up. Um, but yeah, so that
Okay.
was my week. How about you? What were you up to?
Uh, a whole lot of the same, just working and trying to get clearing some stuff out. It's not necessarily spring or fall cleaning or whatever time it is a year, whatever it is. But I felt like I just had this intense urge to just kind of like go through my place and get rid of a bunch of stuff. So we've been gathering things, and what we can donate, we plan to donate, and what needed to just totally go, we're doing that as well. Obviously continuing the workouts and everything else. And also we celebrated a special 5-year anniversary, very personal moment, for myself and my daughter, and the fact that we have, officially uh, uh, been together, or how else you want to say, I went through obviously a custody battle, did all that stuff. That was quite an extensive process, but it was officially 5 years ago that
Right.
we were reunited and so forth. So
Gotcha.
we did that. So great moment. Lots of messages and stuff from people and all that other kind of stuff. But yeah, we had a good time with that. And other than that, we've just been moving right along. So um but yeah, we're not here to talk about all that, and not trying to get all weepy about family stuff and all that. We
Yeah.
are here to talk about the quickening.
Hmm.
And would you like to give the recap for this episode, or do you want me to do it?
I could do it.
I was gonna say, I think I did it last week, so it's
Yeah.
definitely your turn.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. We'll quickly start by mentioning that this is directed by Renee Auberjonois, who plays Odo. And the reason I'm mentioning that at the very beginning, Kira and O'Brien and actually Worf confront uh, Quark, who has somehow made it so that the station is playing ads for Quarks, and the replicators are also when they give out drinks, even on the Defiant, the drinks come in cups that say Quarks on them, and so Worf has something to say to Quark about that. That's the last time we see any of those characters except Kira. So we'll move on from there. So Kira is going to the Gamma Quadrant with Bashir and Dax. They're doing some scientific something or other. It doesn't really matter because when they get to the Gamma Quadrant, they hear a distress beacon asking someone to come help this particular planet because they have a medical emergency. When they arrive, Bashir and Dax beam down and they find a planet completely devastated by a blight. Everyone has these lesions on their faces that is a part of a disease that has and
Mhm.
will kill everyone randomly. It doesn't kill everyone at a certain point. It just at some point it has a quickening stage. It quickens, as the episode we have here, the quickening, that quickens, and that lesion turns red, very painful, and it kills the person usually within a couple days. So when they get to the planet, everyone's affected by it. The civilization is effectively destroyed. Everyone's just basically living in the ruins of a culture that is long since uh, felt fallen apart. And they find a who they think is a doctor at first, but turns out this man named Trevian, who is a man who has lived with the blight longer than most, who has basically a place of where people can come to die with when once they quicken, they can take a medical herb treatment that kills them shortly after they drink it. So basically, when you're going to die because your quickening has arrived, you can go to his place. He will allow you to be there with friends and family. You can, for example, be in a bed for the first time, as this one gentleman says before he dies. Have a meal, be with friends and family, and then he drinks the herbal potion and shortly thereafter dies. Now, of course, Bashir, as our doctor of our crew, is pretty offended by the idea that everyone just gives into it, that there's no one
Mhm.
trying to solve this blight. But as Trevian says, they used to be a culture that had technology and tried solving this, and they never were able to. The best thing they can do now is just give people a swift death once they quicken. So Bashir and Dax convince Kira to let them stay on the planet for a week to try and solve. Does take the runabout to a different solar, some Hadar in the area. So he and Dax stay for a week to try and help these people. They are, of course, initially kind of rejected because no one thinks there is a cure at all. They've had people come around before saying they have a cure, but they were just taken advantage of, and so they don't trust that Bashir can actually do what he says he can. But he says, "I can't make any promises, but I will do what I can." Within the week that he works on people, there's also a young lady who joins them. She is a pregnant woman. Her husband has already died, but she wants to live long enough to see her child born, and so is hoping that Bashir can solve the this blight. They are able to eventually get enough data to start making some attempts at a cure. Unfortunately, it turns out that the medical equipment they're using somehow causes the blight to get worse.
Yeah,
Just
the
being in the
EM field that the Starfleet equipment generates seems to enhance the mutation of the disease, speeds
exactly.
it up.
Exactly. And so some of the people who had gone to Bashir, even if they didn't go to Trevian, the man who will give them the swift, comfortable death, they didn't go to him in order to try and help Bashir. They unfortunately die even more painful deaths than they seem to have otherwise have suffered. And so Bashir is pretty devastated by this. And so when Kira comes back, he says, "I'm going to stay longer and keep working on this." And so Dax and Kira go back to Deep Space Nine. Bashir stays, and the woman that they had been helping, who was pregnant, she quickens, so she's about to die. And so he says, "If you can hold out 2 weeks, I can help you give. I can help you give birth to your baby. So you might die because you've quickened, but I can at least save your child." She holds on long enough to give birth to her child, and the child comes out without the blight. It turns out that the treatment that Bashir had been giving her was not helping her directly, but was being absorbed through the placenta by the baby, and so the baby comes out cured. And so Bashir goes to Trevian, and the rest of have a way for your next generations to live. They will not have the blight. I can't save anyone who currently does, but your next generations will live. And so he's partially successful. Trevian, Bashir was worried, was just obsessed with death as opposed to actually wanting life. Trevian is going to be the one to lead this new uh, policy of helping the babies that are going to be born. And so Bashir goes back to the station, is commended by Cisco for his efforts, but Bashir is continuing to work in the dark, even trying to find a true cure for the disease so that everyone can be cured. Even though, as far as he's done what he can, but he's not satisfied with his efforts so far.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll just say before we move on that I think this is a good episode. It's a hard one. It's definitely a deeper episode. It's not a
Yeah.
light and airy episode like some episodes can be. And so overall, I just want to say I liked it. But yeah, did you? Was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I absolutely agree. Like I said before, this is an episode that typically I would skip, but a lot of times when I watched it today, I recognized that I think part of the reason that I skipped it before was, when I was younger, I didn't want to be bogged down with such a, moral dilemma heavy hitting episode. I like the adventure, the ships and the fighting and the phasers firing and all that kind of stuff. And so when you're, 11, 12 years old and 15, whatever, you don't want to watch stuff like this. But then
Right,
as you get older and, you're exposed to more things and, the world and everything else, like these stories kind of resonate a bit more with you. And so this is probably the first time I've actually gone and watched this particular episode in a good number of years. I'd probably say it's been more than even 10 years since I've actually
mhm,
like watched it again.
right,
And so, yeah, I was very aware of the fact that my perspective on the episode had changed so much. Bashir has like I think of him as a good guy and overall good character, but not necessarily one that is a particular favorite of mine. But in this episode, he really kind of highlighted a lot of the qualities that we've talked about him before on this
right,
show, and he really just kind of got his chance to shine. We also got to see a bit more of Jadzia here, and kind of seeing Uh, that grounding effect that she has on everybody. I mean, we obviously saw that a lot with her relationship with Cisco, but now to see her doing that here for Bashir as well was also really nice. And again, it gives a chance to just see more of Jadzia develop a bit too. We haven't really seen a lot of her either. So
mhm,
these are two characters in particular, Bashir, Jadzia, that we just haven't really had a lot to do with lately. So it's
right,
nice to see them, pop back up.
right.
Now, obviously, there are a lot of allegories for this story. Of course, was there anything when you were watching it? Did you kind of feel like you were picking up what they were laying down there? Like what this was like in that framing context of this was in the 90s and what was going on in the 90s? Did you feel like you got what they were trying to say there or not?
In terms of '90s references, I will admit my ignorance. Again, I was only 5 years old when this episode came out. I will just say this: that while I do believe we have talked about medically induced or medical assistance in death,
Hmm.
medical death before. I can't remember which episode that might have come up in.
Medically assisted suicide.
Yes.
Hmm.
This episode definitely addresses that again. Again, I think we've talked about it before, but this episode
Yes, we
brings it up.
have.
Um, and I there have been developments in the world since I think the last time we talked about it. So, like for example, in Canada, they have something called MAID now. It's called Medical Assistance in Dying, which I think is a real problem because they basically have really opened up the medical system up there to you can get an assisted suicide for really a low bar, I would say. Not just you have a terminal illness, we don't have a cure, you're dying, like, you're already dying, you're in extreme pain. Let's help you just, move on. It's like if you have emotional distress and you don't want to deal with it, then we'll help you.
Hmm.
That is the example that people have always why medical assistance in dying made is the perfect example of a of this type of assisted suicide going too far. If we're going to allow it at all, it needs to be under extremely limited circumstances, as in like you're already dying. Because if you cheapen, basically the argument is if you cheapen life to the point where a suicide on any level is considered acceptable, at what point do people start losing the right to make that decision for themselves? Because now you're just an inconvenience to everyone around you. And
Hmm.
so we're just going to make that decision for you. Because that does seem to be an issue that Canada
Yeah.
is starting to approach. I heard a similar story of something that happened in England recently. We can get into that. But yeah, do you remember
Yeah.
which episode it was that this came up before?
Um,
Of all 100 episodes we've done.
yeah, I know that I believe it was a season 1 episode, but, I'm just drawing a blank as to which one.
Okay.
But I remember us talking in particular, and we're going to talk about him again, of course, Dr. Jack Kevorkian, because this would have been something that would have been around that time period as well. He was a major proponent and supporter of physician-assisted suicide. All records told he did some on the order of 100 plus of these physician-assisted suicides,
Right.
and was even sentenced to some jail time in the late 90s behind him doing this. Now, this episode kind of tackles the more fundamental part of his belief in physician assisted suicide, which is basically if a person is suffering from an incurable, incredibly painful disease that is going to kill them anyway, that the patient has the right to go out on their own terms and with as little pain as possible. And we see that here with
Right.
Trevian in this episode. He is not trying to, you know, necessarily just give you a free pass to kill yourself. It's they're all suffering from this disease. It's a very painful disease as we see throughout the episode, and he's giving them this option of dying with dignity. You get to have this nice place and you have a lavish meal and you get to spend your time with your friends and family. And before you're reduced to just a withering mass of pain and stuff all over you and everything else, you can take this medicine, which is basically like falling asleep. It puts you to sleep and then that's it. So it's a nice alternative to what we see later on with people who don't take Trevian's option and end up dying from it. We see them in bed screaming and howling with pain and convulsions and all the rest of it, before they die. So yeah, it would almost seem like, especially if you've been living with this for a few generations, as we know that they have, that would be a better, a preferable alternative to some people. So yeah, that
Right.
was kind of what they were going for on one aspect of this episode. That should people embrace this kind of peaceful death solution, or should they be more like, Dr. Bashir and hold on to hope and try to work to find a cure, or even if there is no cure, to just live your life as much as possible because you never
Right.
know what's going to happen next.
Right.
And then, of course, the other aspect that was here was their allegory for the AIDS pandemic, the AIDS epidemic, however you want to phrase that. In the early 90s, of course, AIDS was definitely the hot button issue. It was featured on a lot of different shows. Again, that's something that we've talked about on this show a couple of times. Through my run through of ER. Of course, it was the hot button episodes there as well. Again, incurable disease that can definitely lead to debilitating pain and a slow kind of drawn out death. And instead of facing that with ostracization from society and a loss of respect and dignity and so forth, there is this other thing here that you could potentially do for that. So this episode kind of deals with that particular taboo as well. Now, do they fully embrace the AIDS allegory in this episode? No, not necessarily, because in this society, everyone has this disease. There's no people here who don't have it, are immune to it, and therefore are like looking down on other people who have it, or
Right.
and it's not necessarily a proponent of any particular lifestyle or anything like that. Like, as AIDS was kind of pushed into the mainstream back in the 90s, that was also one of the things that came with the coverage of AIDS and the sensationalism of AIDS. But that's not something that we see in this episode at all. So I would say that yeah, this kind of I think they just borrowed certain notes from it, but I wouldn't necessarily say this is their AIDS episode.
Yeah. Until you said AIDS, I wouldn't have made the connection because everyone is affected by it. There is no stigma associated with anyone. I mean, Bashir and Dax just walk in there. They're not afraid that they're going to catch this disease because they think the physiology is different, and they're right about that. So yeah, the allegory of HIV/AIDS. Until you say anything, it wouldn't have come to my mind. Um, yeah, it's yeah, they just walk in. I have to say I was a bit surprised when they were just walking in. I was like, guys, do you not have hazmat
This
suits or anything?
This is
just
like
for precaution.
it's a typical Star Trek trope that, no matter what, that our heroes, when they beam down, they are fine no matter
Yeah,
what. Like, there's not even
right,
a worry that they're gonna beam down and breathe in a stray microbe that's gonna cause their heads to explode or something. Like, they're okay.
yeah,
It's whatever. Now, they've gone through, and if you watch all of Trek, you know that there's enough kind of like background lore here and there that lets you know that, they do preliminary scans of planets and they're reasonably sure that it's all right and whatever else. But we also know that those scans are nonsense, because they half the
right,
time they will beam down and find something malevolent or whatever that's quickly trying to kill everybody.
right,
And in this episode here, they do beam down to the planet, and we're not told if any particular scans are run. We would just assume that it's something that becomes like standard. We don't need to have it said every single
right,
time. It's like standard procedure, you
right,
know. But it doesn't tell them the nature of what the disease is. So knowing that the people were in distress, because I mean they were answering a distress call, knowing that they were in distress from a disease, the fact that they just beamed down standard uniforms and some equipment, yeah, no hazmat suits, no masks, no nothing. um yeah, it's kind of incredulous. But like I said, Star Trek does this all the time. We saw even
yeah,
in the episode when they had the aphasia virus, where everybody was speaking weird words and whatever else,
right, uh-huh,
they were just walking around and touching
yeah,
people, and oh, you're affected. Okay, let me get real close to you
yeah.
and pull you along to wherever else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Cisco
this
was in
was
there with his son, and he wasn't even sick yet. And it's like, come
mm,
on now, bro, you're just making it hard. You're just making
right.
it worse for yourself.
Went straight up to his son and put his hands on his face and did the whole, loving head touch. I mean, great bonding moment for sure. But I'm like, I know when my kid's sick, the last thing I want is for her to touch me. I'm just like, I love you, but please go to your room. Like, get away from me.
Right.
But yeah, they just like, that is a common Star Trek trope. Oh, you're sick? Please come stand right next to me. Um, oh, a whole alien planet full of infected people. Let me beam down in just my uniform. Maybe there's like some kind of magic Trek fiber, Starfleet fiber that repels a lot of viruses that we just don't know about yet.
Right.
So that's why they don't
Yeah.
get sick.
Yeah. I certainly, again, this is another example of they're working on a budget TV show, making them do a bunch of weird extra stuff, and whereas you can just wave it away scientifically as a part of your sci-fi show. All right, fine. However, I will say part of the reason I like this episode is because it's bittersweet. By the
Hmm.
end, Bashir has only been partially successful. The episode ends with him in his workspace, working on the next phase. How do I get a cure? He didn't solve the problem back on the planet for everyone. He only gave them a chance to recover for the
Hmm.
next generation. Um, next generation, haha. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, he says it's a vaccine, and it will cure the pregnant, or not the pregnant women, but it will cure their babies. If they're pregnant, the
right,
babies will be fine, but
right,
it does nothing for the current population. So even
exactly.
if you're a kid who was born before they got there, sorry,
Yeah,
you
literally
you
the day before everything that happened.
yeah.
But the reason I bring up it's bittersweet is because when Bashir is talking to Kira, he's like, "Well, he's to say, hey, let us stay there for a week and come back for us in a week, and then we'll have solved it, or at least we could try and solve it." And he quotes, and it must have been an episode that's happened in the past. I'm sure it is an episode we can go to, but like there was this one planet where it only took us an hour to solve the problem, and we had it figured out within 24 hours or whatever. And I
Yeah.
was like, "Yep, that's
That's a nice wink and nod to Next Generation, and the trouble that we see with a lot of the stuff there, and as we've talked
right."
about on the
Or
show
just
before.
anything. Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
you can say Deep Space Nine has also
Oh, yeah.
problem pretty easily, pretty quickly. In fact, Bashir kind of fails. Not that he truly 100% fails, but he really doesn't. It doesn't come to him immediately. He doesn't get the right answer. There are weird things like how in the world does the electrical equipment cause the disease to get worse? Just stuff like that. How could he have known? He beats himself up like how I should have known. And Dax is like, you couldn't have known. Quit
Yeah.
beating yourself up. So I really do like the fact that this is a bittersweet episode that things don't go right for Bashir. I am a little concerned though. I do think that, for example, him and Dax all by themselves, not being attacked, or like before he fails, them just being attacked by someone like, "Hey, you guys look weird. Get away from us. We don't trust you." Or you have some weird boxes. Maybe I can use that for myself, so I'm going to steal it from you. Like basically, what I'm getting at is that they never suffer violence by people who
I see
are
what you're
desperate.
saying.
I feel like in a real situation, could have gotten a little more hectic, is what I'm getting at. And so again, I'm not trying to. I guess I'm nitpicking here for that reason. Just like I think it would have been a little more hairy, especially because one of the people they meet when they first get there, who they later have more interactions with, is a man who says, "Y'all shouldn't be here. You better just leave." And then when Bashir goes and asks people to give him blood samples, um, a group of people are all around him, and they say, well, like, we've had charlatans promise us cures before, and things didn't go well for them in the past. How can we trust you? So in that moment, that could have turned violent. A mob getting angry, getting whipped up into a frenzy, or after things fail and all the people die at Bashir's little, makeshift hospital. Like basically, what I'm getting at is I feel
Yeah.
like Bashir was in danger if this had been a real situation. Like this could have gone sideways fast in the real world. And I also, the reason I bring that up is because I do think it was a good suggestion when I think Kira said, like, we could go, tell the Federation there's this planet here and they could send a whole team. And Bashir is basically like, I can do it all by myself. Give me a
Well,
week. Which again, I'm saying I like that it's bittersweet. It didn't
yeah.
go his way. But at the same time, I'm also like, yeah, it was a reasonable suggestion to say let's get a whole
It
group of
absolutely
people.
was. And again, that's also another common trope with Star Trek is, somewhere along the way, someone drops in a perfectly sound, reasonable solution, but
Mhm.
because it is seen as like a long term and we're not getting a resolution right away, it's
40
like,
minutes or
no,
less,
we're,
maybe.
we're not we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. And so, and even in this episode, we don't really know how long he stayed there. Like, I mean, we know that he was there for at least a week, but that was not enough time to affect anything. And Kira comes back and she takes Dax, and they leave. And as far as we know, they went back to. I mean, actually, she says, "When you're ready to go, contact the station, and we'll have a runabout out here to get you in a number of days." So he could have
Right.
been there another week, another 3 weeks, a couple of months. We don't really know. My questions on that are, of course, like, does he not have jobs and duties to perform on the station? What,
That's
like,
exactly also
and
what
he
I
didn't
thought. Yeah.
submit any report to Cisco or anybody to say that, like, he's taking a sabbatical or whatever. He just said, "I can't leave these people," and
Yeah.
stayed. I was like, wait a minute. You think that it's going to be okay that the chief medical officer of the space station is just gone for a couple of months? Like,
Yeah.
no, under
The
no
aphasia
circumstances.
virus reappears on the station, and suddenly
Right.
Bashir is not there to help. Yeah.
Right. Like, what would have happened then if some particular medical anomaly that he had experience with popped up and they couldn't get to him, or if the Jem'Hadar who were doing their patrols for the Dominion in the area suddenly shifted their attention and now that whole area got cordoned off and now he was not just on the edge of Dominion space, as they say in the beginning of the episode, but now they're
Right.
in the thick of it. Like,
Right.
there's a lot of things that could have gone wrong here in the episode. You're right on that,
Right.
when it comes to the violence. I always took the in universe, like, they don't really give this explanation, but it's kind of like just how I felt about what we were seeing of the people. Um, the reason why he wasn't attacked was that I think that the fight had been beaten out of them a long time ago.
Fair enough. Yeah.
No one really seemed to be doing anything of any kind of importance except for Trevian. Everybody else just kind of seemed to be existing, waiting to die.
Right.
So, and even they say in the episode, they have this whole culture now that's built around the quickening and having this moment and being, at this very peaceful and tranquil point of death, as much as possible.
Right.
So I just think that they didn't. The reason that they didn't attack them was because it wasn't in their nature anymore. They'd been suffering from this disease for 200 something years, So
Right.
I think that they just, it didn't occur to them anymore. It's like, what's the point in fighting when I mean, you're going to die,
And to
you
be
know?
fair, there's not like we see violence else, and therefore it would make
And
sense
they're
here.
like,
You're right. Yeah, it's
right, and
yeah,
it's not like they beamed in and these people were, like, fighting in the corner somewhere and somebody got stabbed or something in another area of the city. We hear none of that. I mean, it just really feels like this it's a whole culture that is just they're waiting to die. So yeah,
right.
I don't see them putting up much of a fight for anything. Now, yes, they do threaten them with, hey, if you come in here being a shuckster and offering false hopes and whatever else, then we're going to come after you. But even that has like an air of oddly, in my opinion, has an air of hope about it. It's like, we're giving you the opportunity now to leave, and if you do try to sell us a false bag of goods here, we'll only then will we come after you.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and Bashir tells them right away, he's not making any kind of promises or anything like that. So again, I think that that's another reason why they didn't really fight him. But I mean, they didn't embrace him either. And they,
Right.
um, yeah, there's a lot of
Well,
that.
they
It's more
slowly
like
kind
treating
of
him with
do.
it. Yeah, well, I feel like it's more like indifference, and then you kind of reach a point where it's like, well, again, I'm
Might as
gonna
well
die
try.
anyway, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna die, so what's the harm?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was really how, at least how I felt in watching the episode. I also like the fact that he had to stay there, and that he had to fight to get any kind of acceptance, even if it was indifference. I like that he did not cure them magically through the powers of Starfleet. You
By the
know,
power of Starfleet, I
yes,
cure you.
I bless you in the name of the USS Enterprise. You're good. Like we didn't see any of that, as we did see a lot of in Next
Yeah.
Generation, just by the
Say three hail Picards and you'll be cured.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Tap your com badge 3 times and you're healed. That's
Yeah.
kind of how that went in that show a lot. Data, do your magic, and
Yeah, exactly.
that was it. So I was glad to see that that wasn't it. And this is one of the things that kind of became like a sticking point for the show, and why this show to me um, it makes all of Star Trek better, really, because it gives us a chance to see the complex storylines develop, and especially the character development. We don't have to kind of piece things together from episode to episode and only getting little bits here and there. We got to see
Right.
the full development here of Julian's character.
Right.
He was bored in the beginning of the episode. They were doing a survey mission. He didn't want to do it. He was ready to go home. Now we see him. He's charged up, and he's the brash young doctor who's going to solve it like that. Like he says, we came in, and in an hour we solved the problem. We can do that
Right.
here.
Right.
And even when he comes up with his first round of inoculations, he's whispering to Jadzia, just think, that young woman could be holding the cure and she doesn't even know it. Do you think we should tell her? I mean, he sounds like such a jackass,
Yeah.
you know. But and then of course he has his colossal, fall, and even
Right.
in his failure, he is a bit pompous. He's like, "Yeah, there's no cure. The Dominion saw to that. There's not going to be a cure." And Jadzia is quick to remind him, it's like, "Yeah, your thought of coming in and being the great hero savior was arrogant, but
Right.
it's also just as arrogant, if not more so, for you to think that because you didn't find the cure, that there
There
is
is
no cure."
yeah.
So we see him humbled a couple of times here, and him have to rededicate himself, and we get to
Right.
see him truly be a good doctor, a good
Yeah.
scientist, a good person, and
Right.
he does this thing that really just in time allows this woman to not only bear her child as she really wanted to do, but also see that her child will not suffer from this disease. It's her final
Yeah.
moment, but she does get that. She knows that her kid
Yeah.
will live on and grow up and have kids of his own, and so forth. So,
Yeah.
yeah, he does a great thing. But yeah, he does have to be brought low a couple of times in order for it to happen, which, as we know, David, that's like my favorite. When they're brought low to then be built back.
Oh,
That's
I'm
that's
totally
that's it.
there. I totally there. You're apparently you're a little more willing to knock them down. I guess I should say it this way. The reason I have trouble writing stories is because I'm like the person who, when you get insulted, a week later, you have the perfect comeback. I want all my characters to have the perfect comeback in the moment. I want
Oh,
them to like have the right thing to say right then and there, as opposed to giving the characters the flaws necessary to, in the moment fail and then grow as a person. I want them to just be ready to kick butt and take names from the get go.
I
But you're
understand.
right. storytelling. They get home and they grow as the person is they're telling, and that's why this is a great episode because Bashir goes through that journey when it could have very easily been. I mean, I guess there's that episode where he was trying to remake the white for the Jim Hadar, and he failed there too. He wasn't able to get it
Mhm.
done in time, if I remember correctly. But that was still
No,
different. That was
he wasn't
still
able to do it at all. It wasn't even a matter of doing it in time. He wasn't able to
right,
do it at all. And then he
right,
wanted to stay and keep working on it, but
right.
Miles was like, no, they're the enemy." And
Yes, and they're
then
gonna kill us. They're not gonna
right.
like the
And
one
then
guy
to
we have as our friend, but the rest of them aren't our
right.
friend.
And then to
Yeah,
force his hand, O'Brien destroyed all his research.
right,
He blew up everything to make him have to leave.
right,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, yeah, Bashir has been he's the character I would say who has had the most growth on the show, and I like that because first season to now he's definitely he's learned a few things. He's definitely improved
Yeah.
um quite a bit.
He's not so he's not so naive and he's not so brash as he was, and like this episode is great for showing that because we get to see that. We get to see the first part of that where he's bored, he doesn't care about what's going on at first, then he's right there once again being this, very impressionable young doctor who's just caught up in his own, hubris and whatever else, and then he has to be
Right,
reminded. And then, we just kind of see how that plays out later on. And, at the very end of the episode, here comes Cisco, and they have this very brief exchange, but I feel like it's a very important exchange because, here was a moment where, again, typically we would have seen we would have seen Bashir kind of just beaming with pride. I
right,
cured this thing. These people are going to be great from here on out and whatever else. But instead, he's like, we see him still doing research. It's well after hours. He's still working, and he's just like, Cisco congratulates him. He's like, you did a great job there. There's, you know, the people are gonna, their kids are gonna live. And he's like, "Yeah,
yeah,
but people are still dying back there. I still have work to do. I still want to work on it."
yeah,
And
right,
so Cisco leaves him to it. It's not a big scene. It's not Cisco trying to convince him to take the pat on the back or anything like that. But it's like
right,
they both recognize that there's been a fundamental shift here,
right.
and go
Yeah,
your
and
go about your thing.
yeah, that's exactly right. Cisco leaves him to his work. He commends him for what a job well done. He says thank you, but got more to do. And Cisco says,
Yeah,
basically go
yeah,
at it. Yeah.
yeah. In fact, I
Cisco
don't think
is,
Cisco really says anything. He just shows
yeah,
up and he's just like, Yeah, they're dying, but their children won't." And then
right.
turns around and he walks out, kind of
Yeah,
like a gentle reminder that there is hope there. Don't think it hopeless. There is still hope. And then he leaves. So
right.
yeah. Um Short scene. I mean, we really don't see much of Cisco in this episode either,
At
but
all.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, for what it's worth, I mean, he did once again he kind of comes in and grounds us and
right,
then he's out,
right.
so
Yeah, he gets
I
his
like that.
cameo because he's the captain. Yeah, this is I said right from the beginning when we first started that what I wanted were episodes that focused on certain characters and really gave them like certain episodes focused on a certain character, and I liked this one was that for Bashir. This one did a good job with that. The character which we haven't named yet was Akoria. She's the woman who was pregnant and gives birth to
Yes.
a child at the end. I really liked her character. Let me put it this way. I was not when this episode was first starting. We were going on. I was like, they're just gonna solve this problem fairly quick. Well, this is not gonna be a big hassle. It's just gonna be a quick solve the problem. Maybe the Jim Hadar become to hassle them, and they got to, get away from the Jim
Yeah.
Hadar. But it turned into something else, and that really is focused on Ikoria, played by Ellen Wheeler. I don't know what else she's been in, but um, her her disposition is always sweet and kind. She says,
Yes.
when you can tell she had a husband that she loved, and is sad he's gone. He had done a drawing on a small, like a stone, and she says to Dax that he had made a on the side of a building. He had done a full scale portrait. What their world was like before the blight, as a way to give people hope, and that this is the first time she's felt hope since he had died. So it's great. You know, she was a good character, and her death is the most poignant part because she's been pregnant, she's living, she's been fighting to get to have her child, and it's super sad when she dies.
Hmm.
Child, but that takes whatever energy she had left and can't. He in that moment he both realizes that he's been successful and she dies right away, and it's super sad, super again bittersweet moment. And those are I think bittersweet moments are what really make stories like those are the real moments that stories really work. Like that's what we really want. I think is that moment where something is lost but something is gained. And yeah, this is episode that got that really got that emotion across, which is why I think it's a hard one. Like I can honestly say I understand why anyone would skip this episode in rewatches in terms of just I want to casually turn on the TV and watch an episode, like you say you sometimes do.
This would not be
It's
the one. This is not a casual
yeah,
watch. This
not
is
at
definitely
all.
one of those, if you like, especially if you haven't seen the show or haven't seen the show in a long time, if you were to select this as the casual watch episode, you're gonna find yourself going, "Wait, what?
Yeah,
Like what happened?
right.
Let me go back. I missed that."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Ellen Wheeler does a great job here at invoking that kind of um she's it's almost ethereal with her sweetness and her optimism and the way that she wants to have this baby and the signification. Wow, what a word! The significance of the baby,
Mhm.
for the connection to her husband and the potential future and all of these things this baby has come to represent for her life and also her death. And like before they showed up, she still wanted to have the baby.
Right.
She just knew that she was going to die. She knew that
Right.
was going to happen.
Right.
So yeah, I will give her a lot of credit because she helps to give us the major emotional element of the show that was missing. I mean, watching Bashir struggle with a medical problem would have been, I guess, interesting, but without any kind of like connection, anything that
Mhm.
makes it, really like makes the stakes high enough, I guess, wouldn't have made this a comeback episode. You
Right.
wouldn't want to watch this one again. But
Right.
she gives us that. Her excellent portrayal there of, she just wants to be a mom to her kid. She just wants her kid to live. She just, like all of that and watching how she goes from resigning herself to this awful fate to having hope for something better for herself and her kid. Like it was a great moment. And then of course to see that the kid lived, but she died, like you said, it's very bittersweet. It's very emotional. But moments like that, I feel like they're the
Yeah.
best when they're all of those things. If it was
Yeah.
100% hopeful, like if she had lived and the baby lived and everything was sweetness and light, and he had this cure that within an hour was gonna be in the water table and everybody was gonna be fine, even if it was at the tail end of the episode, we watched him basically murder what 7, 8, 9 people in the clinic earlier.
Right.
Even if at the end they'd come up with this cure or whatever, I don't think that the message would have resonated as much. But the
Right.
fact that this main character, Akoria, dies like
Right.
this, I think that really helped.
Right.
Really helped to elevate this episode.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Her character was really important to make it work alongside Trevorian. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Trevian.
Trevian.
Trevian. Um.
Whatever. Yes, it's Star Trek. It's okay if you don't. It's not like you're pronouncing, Sam wrong. It's okay.
Yeah, I liked his character too in the sense that he is presenting the argument about assisted suicide. In a plausible scenario, this is a worldwide phenomenon, and they don't have a cure. It's been 200 years since they first dealt with this, and there's never been a cure since then. There's no reason to think that would change now. And so what he's doing is he's giving people, again, the guy who we see die says this is the first time I slept in a bed, like had a bath or something. Like basically he said
Yeah,
this is
that's
the
what he
first.
says. This is the first time I've slept in the bed, that I've had a bath, that I'm wearing fresh, clean clothes. I'm surrounded by my family and friends for the first time, and I've got this. lavish meal. I haven't eaten this
Yes.
well in however long. I
Right.
haven't eaten this well in, yeah, I think he says I haven't eaten this well in a long time. So
Right.
like Trevian is providing them with this total elevation of their status, whatever it is,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And again, it just kind of to me hammers home the fact that I think these people just they weren't doing anything. What drive do you have to maintain a home when you know you're going to die? Why go to work every
Right.
day when you know you're going to die? And even
Right.
everything that we saw around them, it looked like they were living in a war zone, like they had just had a round of fighting. But we find out that the Jem'Hadar haven't really been around in quite a
Right.
while. They were
Right.
more fearful of Bashir and Jadzia because they thought they might bring the Dominion back. Like the
Right.
Dominion has forgotten all about them,
Right.
basically, and they were afraid that they were going to bring them back.
Right.
So, but yeah, they hadn't repaired anything. They hadn't fixed a building or whatever.
Right.
They were still just living in all of it. So,
Right.
yeah, and then here comes Trevian who's offering them, you know, normalcy, I guess, or
Right.
a return to a type of life that they've kind of given up on. So yeah.
Well, I like that it happens that way because Bashir basically says, "Looks like you're celebrating death. Like you're looking forward to death. Everyone's looking forward to death, and that makes sense. If the only time you ever get to sleep in a bed or a good meal is right
Hmm.
before you die. Even again, what's her name? Ikoria says like even she was looking forward to her death, even because yeah, like that's the only time we get to experience any sort of luxuries. And so, yeah, I can understand Bashir's kind of anger of like, you seem to be making this worse in some capacity, but he's not. He's trying to give people one last shred of dignity before they die, give them some comfort, give them something before they finally pass on. So yeah, it's an interesting argument about assisted suicide in this sense, um, and it makes me. I'll just say it now. I think the Dominion and the Jem'Hadar and the founders are effectively irredeemable at this point. You did this to a whole culture because they wouldn't bend the knee. Like I,
Essentially, yeah.
I mean, never say never. Maybe something will happen. We just had an episode with the Jem'Hadar last episode. We've had interesting Jim Hadar storylines. But man, gosh, this is such a this genocidal atrocity on an entire planet is near on irredeemable. I don't know if there's anything that we would ever say is going to make the founders and anyone else, you know, oh, we're sorry for them. Well, maybe they can change. Still, some justice needs to be served. Someone needs to get told off for this situation. But I don't know. We still got plenty of episodes left. I guess I'll see.
We do, and I mean, they're kind of laying the groundwork here. We've seen it a couple times now. That the Jem'Hadar are not as uniform as we were initially led to believe. That they were these totally obedient soldiers. We've seen a couple of instances now where they have kind of gone off. A group of them anyway has gone off and done their own thing. So. It's entirely possible that we will see more of that, or that we will see. Come into contact with more of these people who are, ruined by the Dominion in some form or fashion. And again, that's not the first time we've seen this. Let's not forget the episode with Hanik and the various people, her people who came through the wormhole looking for Kantana and thought that Bajor was Kantana,
Right,
and they were telling their story about how they were being oppressed until another group came in to oppress the oppressors, and during the scuffle they all escaped.
right.
So yeah, the Dominion has been messing stuff up for people for quite a while. This is the first time though that we're seeing it on such a well, quite frankly, messed up scale. You gave them a disease, like,
Yeah,
not only did you give them a disease, but like you obliterated their whole planet, and then you gave them a disease on top of it. So,
right.
and
As an
then also,
example to other cultures. Ah,
right. And how messed up are you that you give them a disease that doesn't kill them with any kind of uniformity? They could have the disease and be like Trevian and a lifelong suffer. And I mean, as far as anybody can tell, man's been living for decades with this thing, and obviously hasn't died. Versus
right,
other people, they have it, and then a couple months later, dead. It just doesn't make any sense. No
Right.
predictability whatsoever, which I mean just kind of goes to the fact that it's an artificial virus,
Right.
but yeah, it's just way to really add insult to injury. You destroyed their entire culture, way of life, their planet. You've reduced them to nothing, and then you said, on top of that, here's a little, viral thing that's going to wipe you all out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
would agree with that assessment. The Dominion is irredeemable at this point. So yeah, well,
At least when the Borg, take you in, at least they assimilate you into their own culture,
right,
right?
and I mean, depending on how you look at it, they kind of make you better. They don't
Yeah.
augment you and make you weak. You're
Yeah.
stronger, smarter, faster than you were before. You just can't control anything. So
Yeah.
I mean,
And apparently, it can all be undone if Picard's situation is one to go off of because he was
not just
assimilating.
Picard.
Yeah.
Not just Picard. On Voyager 7 of 9, she was assimilated as a child and raised by the Borg, and they still were able to get her out
Yeah.
and return her to some kind of normal functionality there. Now her issue was that since she was raised by the Borg, she didn't really have a previous personality to base anything off of.
Right.
Whereas Picard, obviously, he had lived his whole life. He was a fully formed, man with experiences and whatever else to come back to when he was de-assimilated versus her. She was
Right.
assimilated when she was like 8, so you know vastly different. But yeah, who knows if you get picked up when you're 25, get assimilated, somebody rescues you when you're, I guess, 30, so you spent 5 years as an assimilated drone. You come back with all kinds of knowledge and abilities and whatever else, and you get to just go back to your life.
Right. Yeah.
And you probably live longer too, because they probably replace all of your broken down, damaged parts with hot new, better than ever Borg parts.
No doubt. No doubt.
Hmm. I don't know. Assimilation might need to get me some of that.
Wow. Never thought I heard you say that before, but
Hey, you
okay.
know what? I'm just saying. Just think of it this way: it's a great vacation. You get to just turn your brain off for a while, go to wild, exotic locations. You get a
Never.
massive physical upgrade. You make a bunch of friends, and
uh,
and yeah, then you come
that's the
home.
biggest draw right there, the
There you
friends.
go. Get the friends, and
Yes.
from what we see of Picard, they're with you forever. So there you go.
Oh my goodness.
Well, any final thoughts on the quickening before we wrap everything up? Oh, wait, we do have some final thoughts before we get to final thoughts. We have to talk about Quark and his advertisements. The best little jingle ever. Come to Quark's. Quark is fun. Don't just walk, run.
That's right. It did rhyme. And then when Worf has the cup,
Oh yeah, Worf
when
comes in
he
when you
tilts it,
turns it to the side. Yeah, like you're.
it does the
It
jingle.
says he comes in. He's like, "You, I don't know how you did
Yeah.
it."
On the Dominion's replicators, not just the stations, but the Defiance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Kira's got a nice little threat for him too. I
Yeah.
will come to Quarks and I will have fun.
Have fun. Yeah. Yeah. Funny little moment.
Oh, great! I feel like they do those the best when everything that comes after it is going to be some pretty intense subject matter. Those moments are the funniest. After that, it's like they can't make a whole episode of that because it's just yeah, it's not Star Trek, and
Right.
at least not then. I mean, now if you watch Lower Decks, Lower Decks is nothing but and craziness, but it's fun.
Right.
Hopefully, Quark gets all those out. I do know that for a while there, you could buy those mugs, and it had
Oh,
Quark's face on it, and it did that. You turned it over, and it played the little jingle and whatever else. You could buy them. I don't know if they still exist. I bet you that would be a great Amazon, Etsy, eBay. Is eBay even still a thing?
yeah. I must
Okay.
have on eBay.
Okay. So probably one of those places would have one of those that you could get,
Hanging around.
you know. Or
Man,
heck,
probably worth the
yeah.
pretty penny.
Well, I was gonna say, heck, with the way things are going now, you can probably just make one yourself. You can download the audio file. I'm serious. You can
That's true.
download the audio file right now. It's
3D
completely
printing is a
free,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
And 3D print yourself a mug, style it up however you want to, and get yourself one of those little, sound boxes.
Yep.
USB it in there.
Yep.
You're good. You're
Yep.
good. So yeah, you can probably make one yourself far cheaper than trying to hunt through Amazon or eBay to find one. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What's funny? I'm gonna be joining some friends in a couple weeks for a board game. Apparently, it's a pretty big board game. Takes a long time. It's called Twilight.
Mhm.
He has the three makes a full like 5-6 inch little trophy that he gives out to whoever wins whenever people play. So he's like, "Hey guys, you can win the trophy." Then send a little picture out. This is the trophy you can win. I don't know how much it costs to make a 3D printed object like that because it seems pretty hefty for. I mean, it's like hollow, I guess. But anyway,
Mhm.
but yeah. So yeah, 3D printed objects. Those are
Well,
a
I
thing.
mean, I'm
So
sure that it's still, expensive, but it's not nearly as expensive as it used to be. I've seen that costs for 3D printers and materials have dropped pretty significantly now that they've become kind of, seemingly ubiquitous.
right,
So as kind of with anything, the more that it's out there, then and the less the demand.
right,
Therefore, so forth. So I think we'll eventually see a point where, like everything else, it'll reach kind of like its stable going price and get yourself a good one, and then it's just a matter of getting the right materials for whatever it is you want to do. So who knows, maybe in a couple of years, instead of putting together a giant enterprise, I'll just 3D print me several different other types of ships. Screw ordering month to month kits or whatever, just 3D print me Defiant,
there you go. There
so
you go. Yeah.
yeah.
Boom.
Well, all right. Again, final thoughts on the quickening.
Yeah. Good episode. Bashir goes through some stuff in order to grow as a character. Bittersweet. Yeah. 2 more episodes left in season 4.
That's right. And then we'll be into season 5. And I think that what I want to do for that is I'm going to hold off on starting the fifth book, but that I will start the fifth book with the fifth season.
Okay.
So 5 and 5. That'll give, nice little bit of symmetry there.
Nice. Nice.
Um, Now, when it comes to all things Trek, as we've said before, pretty much everything is off the air except for Lower Decks. They're into the third episode of the fourth season that just came out, so you can watch that. Well, by the time this airs on our podcast, anyway, the fourth episode of the fourth season will be out. All the other shows are done. The next one that's supposed to be released will be the final season of Discovery, but when it comes to any of the other shows, they're all up in the air thanks to the writers' strike that is still going on.
Right.
Brief update on the writer's strike. We have had a couple of celebrities cross the picket line and are into official scab status, doing their shows and stuff again. I saw the news recently, and it was Drew Barrymore and is it Bill Maher?
Yeah,
Bill
I think so.
Maher, Bill
Yeah.
Maher. He's got a talk show of some,
Yeah.
whatever. So those two are now officially going back to work on their shows, sans writers, and yeah, they've given their own various reasonings behind it, but as anybody who's involved, they're basically on scab status. So I haven't totally looked into what their
Yeah.
reasons were for why they've decided to go and do their show again, but that's what I heard. It was those two
Bill
were
Maher,
announced, and yeah.
I remember what Bill Maher had said. He was like, "Look, I got a whole crew of people like behind like the people who run like the cameras and all that. Those people need work. I won't do like my monologues or the stuff that would have been part of the written end of the show. So he's like doing just the interview stuff that he does, I guess. I
Mm.
never watched the show before. I just see clips of his stuff sometimes, but he was saying that basically there are other people who are not part of the Writers Guild who need work, and so I'll give them a chance to have work by doing this. So we'll see how that plays out. This has
Yeah.
been going on for 5 months now. I,
Yeah.
I've, we've talked about it a little bit, and we don't have to go into more detail now because we can wrap up. But I just find it really interesting because I feel like there's so many like moving parts, so many elements.
Yeah.
I feel like there are arguments for why each side is being intransigent, but like I mean, at some point someone's got to break. I mean, 5 months in, that's a long time. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, I feel like there's so much that's going on that it's almost impossible to track every single argument on both sides. I do feel like I side more with the writers in this because they're the ones who are obviously creating the work, and they want to be credited for their work. And I think everybody agrees that you should be credited for your work. I don't think there's anybody who's ever like, no, I'm going to work forever on this thing and you don't have to pay me. Like, no, no one's
Right,
ever said that. So I agree with that, but I don't know what the other side of it 100%
right,
is. So,
right.
but yeah, I just hope that it does get resolved soon because that giant white void of nothing is approaching ever closer. And yeah, that'll be an interesting moment when there's nothing. And
Year
I almost want to
2024 will
see
be
it.
the year of the rewatch.
That will exactly be it. The year that you either rewatch or you cross platforms or you do all these things because there's not your favorite show is not new. So it'll be interesting to see how that
Right.
plays out. Well, all right, guys, I think that's
Mm,
going to do it for us tonight on this episode of the Fire Caves. You can find us on all the social platforms now. We are back on X. We are back on X. Wow, that
fix.
sounds terrible. Um,
I
Twitter, all of it. We're there. You can also listen to us anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. So until next week, guys, and we're talking about the episode Body Parts, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.